Soft skills can be learnt from books, during conversations, and in teams. We all need them, so how can you develop them? Let's explore. Maybe you've heard the phrase, there are two options, adapt or die. This was said by Andy Grove, one of the former CEOs of Intel, who was a rather famous businessman for being able to lift Intel into the stratosphere that it experienced just before the early 2000s, when we all needed and wanted personal computers. Today's topic is about adaptability. This idea, not so much of adapt or die, but how well do you cope with adapting when you're faced with a situation where you need to do something different? We all have differing levels. And in my article this week on LinkedIn, I was really thinking about the spectrum that's given in the rubric of soft skills that you might want to take a look at, where we can be either developing these skills or proficient, right through to being excellent in these skills. And as I'm mulling with some of these ideas, I really come to see that it's about how emotionally resistant we might feel in particular situations. So when was the last time you had to adapt, and how did you cope with that? What kinds of tools did you have at your disposal to help you in that particular situation? So that's what I'd like to explore today with you. Just a reminder, here are our 30 soft skills. And you see here, adaptability is in brown. It's here just around, I don't know if you can see my screen there. On the first column, it's one of the first brown ones there. Our brown skills are our navigational skills. These are the ones that help us to move through the world. Built on our intrinsic foundational skills, these are the skills that we need to have in our life. So adaptability is actually the key soft skill that you should be working on and thinking about for your life. And this is the reason why I've presented it today so early on in week 7 now of this journey into these different soft skills. Here's the QR code if you want to check out the rubric. There is a process to adapting, and I had a little bit of help here from ChatGPT as I was thinking about this particular concept. So we all notice change. Change happens to us constantly. And so the question then is, what do we understand that the change means to us? This is the red box here. So when we experience change, it's then, what does this mean for me? Is this good or is this not so good? And therefore, that decision that we make may be based on our previous experiences, how comfortable we feel in our present routine, the things that we're used to doing, the ultimate impact that this might have on us. So maybe we can adapt to small changes. Like I mentioned, the new hair care product that I needed in my article, in the LinkedIn article yesterday. It's worked out well today. So it's a small adaptation, or it might mean adapting to a whole new way of life when you say move country, as I did 11 years ago. It's then about our response. And this is where it gets really interesting. So for me, this is the crucial part, which can help us to increase our adaptability. It's choosing the response. So are we pushed into a response, or can we take charge of our response? Can we be change ready, enabling ourselves to focus on the response that we want to choose? So this is where we do have that choice, as Viktor Frankl said, between stimulus and response. We have a choice, which is why I've circled that there. So how will you respond? And therefore, that leads to the type of behavior that you will adjust from there. So for me, that question is really about, as I said, how emotionally invested are you in the change that's required, and how much is this pushing you outside of your comfort zone? We all have patterns. We all get used to certain ways of being that we enjoy. And so when we have to adapt, it means that that may no longer be. So the question could be, how can we adapt in such a way that allows us to positively pivot towards a new direction, where we can feel that sense of autonomy, meaning, and mastery coming into that? That will help us to adapt, as I talked about in a previous episode on motivation. So thinking about that, in a lot of cases, we get pushed into change. There's a restructure at work. we didn't want that, we didn't expect that, and we have to cope with that. It may be that there's the loss of a family member or of a friend or something that changes significantly in our lives that is completely unexpected. So we're absolutely pushed. We're not ready for that change. And so, of course, there's an emotional response in that particular situation. So we have to kind of learn as we adapt to do something a little bit different. So maybe you can start to think about being more deliberate in your adaptability, choosing, for instance, different ways to go to work or different ways in which to achieve the tasks that you have to do in your daily life. And so really disrupting the patterns that you may have and the comfort, the emotional comfort that you have with those particular patterns as well. So we all have those opportunities to adjust our behavior deliberately. And you see here an example that I use. I'm a young science ambassador with the OAED, OEAD. I always get that wrong. And as a young science ambassador, I'm telling and teaching young students now that they need to increase their adaptability. So in the example here, they get a test on Monday. But I had plans over the weekend to do particular things. And so, gosh, I've got to make a choice here. What am I going to do? I feel annoyed that my teacher has set a test on Monday, but I also want to pass and I want to get on with my life. And so what can I do? But I've also got my friends in the middle who aren't necessarily in that class. And so they may not be facing the same situation. I can, of course, as I asked the students the other day, they might decide to do a little bit of both. They might cancel their friends. They might skip the test and just blow it off. There are multiple choices here, which each has their own emotional feeling about which one is perhaps more appropriate. So there's not a one size fits all to adapting, but what we can think about is really viewing this as a key soft skill that we need to develop. We should explore the emotions of change. So when we're faced with a situation, what's coming up for you? What data is and the message is behind that you ought to pay attention to? And as you start to seek responses that inspire you, that you can move towards in a new direction, maybe you can see that there's benefit at the end of that decision change, that you can see that, there is sort of light at the end of that tunnel. Practice with small moments. So we're not talking about moving countries tomorrow, but perhaps you start with a new route to work or a new type of coffee or being open to saying to the person at the cafe, hey, serve me something nice. I'm waiting to see what I might get. So having these elements of surprise in your life where you're having to deal with and cope with those changes could be a great way to practice. And as I say there, last but not least, how can you be proactive in that change? So what do you need to think about and develop for yourself that's going to help you to really become an agent of change? Change is all around us. And as Andy Grove said, adapt or die. So don't get pushed into change. Perhaps be proactive about change and see how you can develop those adaptability skills further.